My name is Evelyn Harper, and for 31 years, I believed I was the mistake my family learned to tolerate. If you had asked anyone in the Harper family about me, they would have smiled politely and said, "Oh, Evelyn is sweet, but she's not built for big things." Sweet, quiet, slow, useful when someone needed errands done, invisible when decisions were made. My older brother, Marcus, was different. Marcus was the golden son, the one my parents praised at every dinner, every charity event, every family gathering where expensive wine was poured and fake love filled the room like perfume. He had the Yale degree, the sharp suit, the perfect wife, the perfect smile, and according to my father, he had the Harper blood. I used to wonder what kind of blood I had. Maybe water, maybe nothing at all. For years, I sat at the far end of tables listening to people decide my future as if I were a chair, a lamp, a quiet object in the room. But the night my father announced that Marcus would inherit everything, in front of 200 guests at the Grand Astoria Hotel, a woman I had never seen before walked up to me, placed a black envelope in my hand, and whispered, "Your mother wanted you to have this when they finally showed you who they really are." That was the night my family's secret story began. That was the night every lie buried inside the Harper family started crawling into the light. My father, Charles Harper, owned Harper and Vale Estates, one of the oldest real estate firms in Boston. My mother, Lorraine, came from old money, the kind of money that teaches people how to smile while cutting you open. To the outside world, we were a successful family. Inside our house, love had a ranking system. Marcus was first. I was somewhere below the antique silverware. My mother used to correct me in public for speaking too softly, then scold me in private for speaking at all. My father never shouted much. He didn't need to. His disappointment was quiet, polished, and heavy. When I was 17, I told him I wanted to study architecture because I loved buildings, not for the money, but because I could feel stories inside walls. He laughed and said, "Evelyn, some people design the house, and some people keep it clean." Everyone laughed. Marcus laughed loudest. I smiled because that was what I had learned to do when humiliation walked into the room wearing my family's face. Years later, after my mother died, something in the house changed. Not grief, calculation. My father and Marcus began having meetings behind closed doors. My Aunt Vivian started visiting more often, pretending to bring casseroles while asking questions about accounts, deeds, and shares. Greedy relatives can smell inheritance drama before the body is cold, and in my family, they wore pearls and Italian leather while doing it. I was told not to worry about grown-up matters, even though I was 31 and working full-time in the company archives, cataloging old property files nobody else had patience to read. They paid me less than the interns, but I knew every building, every trust, every hidden clause inside those dusty folders. They thought I was filing paper. I was learning the bones of the empire. The night of Marcus's celebration came 6 months after my mother's funeral. My father called it a legacy dinner. I knew what that meant before I arrived. The Grand Astoria ballroom glittered with chandeliers, white roses, champagne towers, and the kind of people who kiss both cheeks while counting your worth. I wore a navy dress I had bought on sale and shoes that pinched my toes. My mother would have noticed that. For a second, I missed her so badly I could barely breathe. Then I remembered how many times she had looked away when my father made me small, and the grief became complicated again. At 8 o'clock, my father stepped onto the stage with Marcus beside him. He raised his glass and said, "Tonight, I am proud to announce that my son, Marcus Harper, will inherit full leadership of Harper and Vale Estates and the family trust." The room exploded with applause. My brother bowed his head like a king accepting a crown. No one looked at me. Not one person. And then the woman appeared. She was older, with silver hair pinned at the back of her neck and eyes that looked like they had survived storms. She didn't smile. She simply placed the envelope into my shaking hand and said, "Your mother was not who they told you she was. Neither are you." Before I could ask her name, she walked away. Inside the envelope was a key, a letter, and the first sentence that broke my life open. "Evelyn, if you are reading this, your father has chosen greed over truth, and now you must choose courage over silence." I left the ballroom through a side hallway near the kitchen, where servers were stacking plates and pretending not to hear rich people applaud their own cruelty. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the letter. For a moment, I pressed my back against the cold wall and listened to the muffled sound of my father's voice still floating from the ballroom. He was praising Marcus, thanking investors, speaking about legacy as if legacy meant property, signatures, and bloodlines. But my mother's handwriting was in my hands, and suddenly the woman who had spent my entire life looking fragile, obedient, and silent felt more alive than everyone in that room. The letter said there was a storage box at Commonwealth Private Bank under my mother's maiden name, Lorraine Vale. The key opened it. The box contained documents my father had hidden, including the real version of my grandfather's trust, the one created before Harper and Vale became powerful. My mother wrote that my father had pressured her for years to sign over voting rights that were never his to control. She wrote that Marcus knew more than he admitted. She wrote that Aunt Vivian had helped bury records after my grandfather's stroke. But the sentence that made me slide down the wall and cover my mouth was this: the company was never meant to pass to Marcus alone. Your grandfather left controlling interest to the child who preserved the original properties, not the child your father preferred. That child is you. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. My whole life, I had been told I was the weak branch of the family tree. Now my dead mother was telling me the roots had been waiting for me. I read the letter again, slowly, because pain makes you suspicious of hope. There were instructions. I had 48 hours to present the sealed trust documents to the board before Marcus's appointment became legally active. 48 hours. My father had planned the dinner on a Friday night. By Monday morning, Marcus would be named executive trustee. My mother had known him well enough to build a trap around his arrogance. When I came back into the ballroom, my father was still smiling for photographs. Marcus stood beside him, one hand in his pocket, his wife, Celeste, glowing next to him in a gold dress. Aunt Vivian saw me first. Her eyes dropped to the envelope, and for half a second, her face changed. Fear. Real fear. Then she recovered and walked toward me with the sweetness of a woman who had poisoned people politely for years. Evelyn, darling, where did you run off to? Your father was worried. That was a lie. My father had not noticed I was gone. Who gave you that? She asked. I held the envelope closer. A friend of Mom's. Vivian's smile hardened. Your mother had no friends. Your father didn't know. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I understood that adults who scare you as a child only remain powerful if you keep seeing them from below. Maybe that was the problem, I said. Marcus found us near the dessert table. What's going on? He asked, still wearing his public smile. Vivian touched his arm. Your sister is being emotional. There it was, the family weapon. Emotional, difficult, confused, unstable. Words used to turn truth into noise. Marcus leaned close enough that no one else could hear him. Not tonight, Evie. Don't do this little wounded act. Dad gave you a place in the company. Be grateful. I stared at my brother, the boy who once let me take blame for a broken window because he had a scholarship interview the next day, the man who now believed inheritance was love made legal. I have been grateful for scraps my whole life, I whispered. Tonight I'm done. If you are listening to this, and you have ever been made to feel like asking for respect is betrayal, stay with me, because I promise you, sometimes the moment they call you dramatic is the exact moment you are finally telling the truth. And if this story is touching something real in you, write, I deserve truth, in the comments, because I want to know I'm not speaking into the dark. Back to that night. Because what happened next was the first time my father stopped looking through me and started looking at me like I might actually be dangerous. At 11 that night, I was standing outside Commonwealth Private Bank in the rain, waiting for the emergency access officer my mother's letter had named. Her name was Ruth Bellamy, the same silver-haired woman from the ballroom. She arrived in a black coat, holding an umbrella and a leather folder. Your mother trusted me, she said. And she was terrified you would never trust yourself. I didn't know what to say to that. Trust was not something my family taught. They taught performance, silence, comparison, and survival. Ruth led me through a private entrance, down an elevator, and into a quiet room where a steel box sat on a table beneath soft yellow light. When I turned the key, my hands stopped shaking. Not because I was calm, but because some deeper part of me knew the door to my old life had already closed. Inside the box were trust documents, old partnership agreements, handwritten notes, and a video drive labeled, "For Evelyn, when courage is required." I watched the video on Ruth's laptop. My mother appeared on the screen thinner than I remembered, wearing the blue sweater she loved, sitting in her garden room. For a second, I forgot everything and just whispered, "Mom." Her eyes were tired but steady. "Evelyn," she said on the recording. "I am sorry I let you believe you were less than you are. I thought keeping peace would protect you. It did not. It only protected your father." I cried then. Not pretty tears. Not movie tears. The kind that bend your body because they are carrying years. She explained everything. My grandfather, Arthur Vale, had built the original company with a clause meant to protect it from reckless heirs. The controlling trust did not automatically pass to the oldest son or the favored child. It passed to the descendant who had demonstrated stewardship of the historic properties. My work in the archives, the preservation reports I had quietly written, the restoration proposals I had submitted under department names because no one would attach mine, had triggered the condition. My mother had gathered proof. My father had buried it. Marcus had taken credit for 2 of my reports in board presentations. Aunt Vivian had signed false internal memos, stating I was only a clerical assistant. Family betrayal does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives as paperwork. By noon the next day, Ruth had connected me with an attorney named Samuel Price. He reviewed the documents and looked at me over his glasses. "Miss Harper, legally speaking, your father's announcement last night was theater. These documents are real. If we file before Monday morning, the board must freeze Marcus's appointment." I asked him what would happen after that. He said, "War." I almost laughed again. War sounded dramatic. What I had lived through was quieter than war, but it had still left scars. My father called me 27 times that Saturday. Marcus called 13. Aunt Vivian sent 1 text. "Whatever you think you know, you are confused." That text helped me more than she knew. Confused was the word they always used when they needed me to doubt myself. This time, I printed it and placed it in my folder as evidence of pattern. Not law, but something almost as important, proof of how they operated. On Sunday evening, I went to my mother's grave. The sky was pink and gray, and the grass was damp under my knees. I wanted to be angry at her. I was angry. She had known. She had seen. She had waited until death to tell me I mattered. But grief is never clean. I touched the stone and said, "I don't know if I forgive you yet, but I'm going to use what you left me." The wind moved through the trees like an answer. Monday morning, I walked into Harper and Vale Estates wearing the same navy dress from the dinner because I wanted them to remember the night they tried to erase me. The receptionist stared. People whispered. Marcus came out of the conference room first. His face was pale with rage. "You need to leave," he said. I looked past him through the glass wall. My father was already seated at the board table. Aunt Vivian was beside him. Samuel Price stood at my shoulder and said calmly, "Miss Harper has legal standing to address the board." Marcus laughed. "She has no standing anywhere." Samuel opened his folder. "That is exactly what we're here to correct." The boardroom smelled like coffee, leather, and panic dressed as professionalism. My father sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, hands folded. He had aged overnight, but not in a way that made me pity him. He looked like a man whose mask had slipped and who was furious at the mirror for showing it. Marcus stood near the window, arms crossed, refusing to sit because sitting would mean accepting that this meeting was real. Aunt Vivian whispered to a board member with the soft urgency of someone trying to poison the well before the water was tested. Samuel began with facts. He presented the original trust, the stewardship clause, my preservation reports, and the internal memos that showed my work had been reassigned under Marcus's name. With each page, the room changed. At first, the board members looked annoyed, then curious, then uncomfortable. My father interrupted twice. The chairman warned him once. Marcus laughed at the wrong moment, and that laugh did more damage than any document. It sounded entitled. It sounded cruel. It sounded like the truth. Then Samuel played my mother's video. My father stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "Absolutely not," he snapped. "This is private family material." The chairman looked at him coldly. "Charles, this concerns corporate control." My father's face turned red. It concerns my dead wife being used by my unstable daughter. There it was. The word he had been saving. Unstable. I felt the old shame rise in me like heat, but this time I did not bow my head. I looked around the table and said, if I were unstable, he would not need to be this afraid of what I have. The video played. My mother's voice filled the boardroom. She spoke about coercion, buried records, my work, Marcus's false credit, and my father's plan to transfer trust control before any independent review. Aunt Vivian looked down. Marcus stopped smiling. My father stared at the screen as if he could silence my mother by hating her hard enough. When the video ended, no one spoke. Silence can be judgment when truth has already done the talking. The chairman turned to me. Miss Harper, what are you asking this board to do? I had rehearsed revenge in my head all weekend. I had imagined removing my father, humiliating Marcus, exposing Vivian in front of everyone. But standing there, I realized revenge would still make them the center of my life. I did not want that anymore. So I said, I am asking for an independent audit, an immediate freeze on Marcus Harper's appointment, restoration of authorship and compensation for my work, and a board vote on whether Charles Harper should remain acting trustee while the investigation proceeds. Marcus exploded. This is insane. She's trying to steal the company because Mom filled her head with nonsense. I turned to him. No, Marcus. I'm trying to return the company to the rules our grandfather wrote before you and Dad decided rules were only for other people. He pointed at me. You don't even know how to lead. That hurt more than I wanted it to, because part of me feared he was right. But another part of me, the part my mother had finally reached too late, answered anyway. Maybe not the way you do, but I know how to listen. I know how to preserve what matters, and I know the difference between inheritance and entitlement. The vote happened at 10:42 a.m. Marcus's appointment was frozen unanimously. My father was suspended as acting trustee by a narrow margin. Aunt Vivian was removed from all document access pending investigation. I did not feel victorious. I felt hollow, like someone had opened a window inside my chest, and cold air was moving through. My father stood slowly, looked at me, and said in a voice so quiet it almost broke me, "You have no idea what you've done." I answered, "I know exactly what I stopped." The news spread faster than truth usually does. By Tuesday morning, people in the company who had ignored me for years were suddenly saying good morning with too much warmth. By Wednesday, a business blog had published a careful article about leadership uncertainty at Harper and Vail. By Friday, Marcus's wife Celeste had unfollowed half the family and moved into her sister's house. That detail should not have mattered, but it did, because it proved the perfect life Marcus displayed was already cracking before I touched it. Family secrets revealed do not create rot. They expose what was already there. My father refused to speak to me for 2 weeks. Marcus sent one email through his lawyer accusing me of emotional manipulation, corporate sabotage, and jealousy. I read it once, then forwarded it to Samuel. The old Evelyn would have written 3 pages begging him to understand. The new Evelyn made tea and went to bed. Growth is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply refusing to perform pain for people who enjoy watching you bleed. The audit uncovered more than I expected. Marcus had taken credit for 4 preservation proposals I had written. Aunt Vivian had redirected consulting payments to a shell vendor connected to her son. My father had not stolen money directly, but he had abused authority, hidden trust records, and misled the board about succession. When Samuel explained it, he used calm legal language. Breach of fiduciary duty, misrepresentation, improper transfer attempt. I heard simpler words beneath them: greed, pride, betrayal. One afternoon, I found myself standing in the archive room where I had spent so many invisible years. Dust floated in the light. File boxes lined the walls. My old desk sat in the corner with a cracked mug still beside the keyboard. I touched the chair and remembered every lunch I had eaten alone, every report I had written under someone else's name, every time I told myself being useful was close enough to being loved. It wasn't. Please hear me when I say this, because maybe someone watching needs it. Being needed is not the same as being valued. Being tolerated is not the same as being loved. And silence is not peace if it is costing you your soul. If this story is stirring something in you, If you have ever been the quiet one in the family, the one expected to forgive without ever being protected, leave a comment and tell me where you found your strength. And if you feel this story has any part that sounds too polished, too artificial, or not real enough, tell me honestly. I want these stories to feel human because pain is human, healing is human, and every voice here matters to me. Now let me tell you about the day Marcus finally came to see me, because that was the day I realized the villain of a family drama is sometimes just another broken child who chose the wrong way to survive. Marcus arrived at my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening. No suit, no watch, no perfect smile. He looked smaller without the family spotlight behind him. I almost didn't let him in. Then I remembered my mother's video and the word courage, and I opened the door. He stood in my living room for a long time before speaking. "Dad told me you were weak," he said. "He said if I didn't stay ahead of you, you would drag the family down." I laughed once, bitterly. "And you believed him?" His eyes filled, but he did not cry. I wanted to. It made everything easier. That honesty hurt more than denial. He admitted he had known some of my reports were being used under his name. He told himself it was harmless because I would never lead anyway. He apologized, but not beautifully. Real apologies are ugly. They stumble. They repeat. They do not fix what they name. I did not forgive him that night. I told him forgiveness was not a door he could knock on once and expect to enter, but I also told him I was tired of carrying hatred like an heirloom. He nodded and said, "I don't know who I am without being Dad's success story." For the first time in my life, I saw my brother not as the golden child, but as another person shaped into a weapon and praised for staying sharp. The final board decision came in October. My father resigned permanently from all trustee duties. Marcus stepped down from succession consideration for 5 years and agreed to repay compensation tied to the reports he had falsely claimed. Aunt Vivian settled quietly and disappeared from family gatherings, with the dignity of someone who still believed consequences were rude. I was offered the position of Director of Preservation and Community Development, with a board seat tied to the Trust Stewardship Clause. I accepted. Not because I wanted a crown, but because I finally understood that walking away from power can be noble, but using power responsibly can be healing. My first major proposal was not glamorous. It was a plan to convert 3 neglected historic properties into mixed-income housing while preserving their architecture. My father would have called it sentimental. Marcus would once have called it bad margins. My grandfather, I think, would have understood. Buildings, like families, fall apart when people only care how they look from the outside. In December, my father asked to meet me at the old Harper house. I had not been there since the night of the legacy dinner. The foyer still smelled like lemon polish and cold memories. He was in the library, sitting beneath a portrait of my grandfather. For once, he did not look powerful. He looked old. "Your mother loved you," he said. I almost walked out. "That's not enough," I answered. He nodded slowly. "I know." Those 2 words were the closest thing to humility I had ever heard from him. He admitted he had resented me because my mother saw herself in me, and he had spent their marriage trying to control the parts of her he could not understand. He admitted Marcus was easier because Marcus wanted approval so badly he could be shaped. "And me?" I asked. My father looked at the floor. "You watched. You noticed. You remembered." That frightened me. I wanted that confession to heal me. It didn't. But it gave shape to the wound. Sometimes that is the beginning. I told him I was not ready for a normal father-daughter relationship. I did not know if I ever would be. But I was willing to meet once a month, in public, with boundaries. No insults. No business pressure. No rewriting history. He agreed, maybe because he had changed. Maybe because he had no choice. I decided I did not need to know which one yet. On Christmas Eve, Marcus and I visited our mother's grave together. We stood in silence for a long time. Then he placed a white rose beside the stone and said, "She should have protected you sooner." I said, "Yes." He looked at me. "I should have too." I said, "Yes." The snow started falling, soft and quiet, and for once there was no speech big enough to ruin the truth. By the following spring, my life looked nothing like I had imagined. I had my own office with glass walls and sunlight. My name was on reports I had actually written. Younger employees came to me with ideas because they knew I would listen. Sometimes I still heard my father's voice in my head, telling me I was not built for big things. When that happened, I walked down to the archive room, opened one of the old property files, and reminded myself that foundations are rarely beautiful, but everything strong depends on them. The biggest plot twist was not the secret trust. It was not the hidden documents, or the boardroom vote, or the fall of the golden sun. The real twist was discovering that I had not been waiting for my family to give me value. I had been waiting for myself to stop handing them the measuring tape. 1 year after the legacy dinner, Harper and Vale held a community opening for the first restored building under my division. No champagne tower, no staged portraits, no speeches about bloodlines. Just families walking through new apartments with wide eyes, children touching brick walls older than their great-grandparents, city officials shaking hands, and employees smiling because, for once, the company had built something that did not feel like a monument to ego. Marcus came. He stood near the back, quiet, watching. My father came too, leaning on a cane he pretended not to need. He did not try to take the microphone. That alone felt like a miracle. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at the crowd and thought about my mother's letter, my grandfather's claws, Ruth Bellamy's steady eyes, Samuel's calm voice, Marcus at my apartment door, my father in the library, and the version of me who once believed being quiet would keep her safe. This building was almost sold, I said. It was almost stripped, gutted, and renamed by people who never cared what it meant. But some things are worth preserving. Not because they are perfect, but because they still have life inside them. My voice trembled. I let it. The same is true for people. After the ceremony, a young woman from the accounting department approached me. She said she had watched me for years in the archive room, and always wondered why I stayed so quiet. Then she whispered, "My family treats me like I'm nothing too." I held her hand and told her the truth I wish someone had told me earlier. Do not wait until they understand you to begin respecting yourself. She cried. I cried. Neither of us apologized. That evening, I went home and opened my mother's letter again. I still felt anger when I read it. I think I always will. Love that arrives late still leaves you hungry in the years before it comes. But I also felt something softer beside the anger. Not forgiveness exactly, maybe release. My mother had failed me in life and helped me after death. Both were true. People are complicated. Family is complicated. Healing does not require us to lie about harm. It asks us to stop letting harm be the only thing that defines us. Marcus and I are not close the way siblings in movies become close after one emotional conversation. Real life is slower. We have coffee sometimes. We talk carefully. He is learning to apologize without asking for comfort. I am learning to listen without shrinking. My father and I meet once a month. Some meetings are awkward. Some are painful. Once, he asked me about a project and actually listened to the answer. I went home and cried for an hour, not because everything was fixed, but because one small honest moment can grieve what should have been there all along. If you have listened this far, I want to pause with you, not as a storyteller above you, but as a woman sitting beside you. Maybe your family secret is not about inheritance drama. Maybe there is no hidden trust, no boardroom, no lawyer with a folder. Maybe your family secret is simply that everyone knows who hurts people, but nobody says it out loud. Maybe you are tired of being called sensitive when you are actually wounded, tired of being called dramatic when you are finally honest. If that is you, please leave your thoughts below. Tell me what part felt real, what part touched your heart, and yes, tell me honestly if any part felt like AI or not human enough. Your comments help me make the next family drama story deeper, more emotional, and more meaningful for this community. Looking back now, I understand that the inheritance was never the real gift. The real gift was proof. Proof that I had not imagined the unfairness. Proof that the quiet work mattered. Proof that one person, even a flawed person like my mother, had seen enough truth to leave a light behind. But I also understand this. Not everyone gets proof. Not everyone gets documents, apologies, or a dramatic moment where greedy relatives are exposed and family secrets are revealed. Some people have to choose themselves without evidence anyone else will validate. That choice is still real. That courage still counts. I did not become powerful because I inherited shares. I became powerful when I stopped begging people who benefited from my silence to explain my worth to me. I became free when I realized family is not an excuse to destroy someone slowly and call it love. Family should be a place where truth can breathe, where mistakes can be owned, where kindness is not treated like weakness. And if the family we are born into cannot give us that, then we must become the beginning of a better one. We must geohat, plant better seeds, return to the root, kwe ve gok, and choose to give what we were denied: respect, honesty, protection, and love, without humiliation. So no, I do not tell this story to encourage revenge. Revenge would have kept me chained to their cruelty. I tell it because justice matters, boundaries matter, truth matters. And sometimes the most emotional family drama is not when someone loses everything, but when someone finally finds herself. If you stayed with me until this moment, thank you from the deepest place in my heart. Please leave a comment and tell me what you felt, what you learned, and what you think could make the next story even more real, more human, and more touching. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs strength, and remember, your value is not decided by the people who failed to see you. Be kind, grow stronger, give more light than you received, and become the person your younger self was waiting for. Tip pha Lin Mach. Dưới đây là phần tiếp theo, liền mạch hoàn toàn của câu chuyện, giữ đúng nhịp kể, cảm xúc sâu, và phong cách người phụ nữ từng trải, đang kể lại cuộc đời mình. 6 months after everything changed, people started telling my story as if it had always been inevitable. They said things like, "Of course she rose up," or, "You could always tell she had strength." That's the funny thing about truth. Once it shows itself, people rewrite the past to make it look obvious. But nothing about my journey felt obvious when I was living it. It felt lonely. It felt terrifying. It felt like standing on the edge of something with no guarantee that I wouldn't fall. The hardest part wasn't facing my father or Marcus or even the boardroom. The hardest part was facing myself in the quiet moments when no one was watching, when the adrenaline faded, and all that was left was doubt. There were nights I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I had gone too far. If maybe I had misunderstood everything. If maybe I really was the problem, like they had always said. But then I would remember the archive room, the dust, the files, the years I spent proving something to people who had already decided I wasn't worth seeing, and slowly, the doubt would loosen its grip. One afternoon, I received an email from a woman named Claire Jennings. She worked at a small nonprofit focused on preserving community housing. She wrote, "I saw your name mentioned in a business article. I don't know you, but I recognize something in your story. Would you be open to meeting?" I almost ignored it. Old habits, dismissing opportunities before they had the chance to dismiss me. But something in her message felt honest. We met at a small cafe, nothing like the polished spaces my family used to dominate. Claire spoke about buildings the way I did, with feeling, with memory, with purpose. Not numbers first. People first. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged in the conversation. I just was. That meeting changed something in me. Because for years, I thought my only choices were to fit into my family's world or to be rejected by it. I never considered there might be another world entirely. One where my way of thinking wasn't a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be valued. And maybe you understand what I mean. Maybe you've spent years trying to fit into a space that was never built for you. If that's you, I want you to pause for a second and really feel this. You are not wrong for being different. Sometimes, you're just in the wrong room. If you've ever felt that way, leave a comment. Tell me where you are in your journey. I read them, and they matter more than you think. Now let me tell you about the moment I realized my story wasn't just about surviving my family anymore. It was about building something beyond them. By the end of that year, I made a decision that surprised even me. I stepped back from the board seat. Not completely. I still held my position as majority stakeholder, still had influence, still protected the structure my grandfather intended. But I no longer wanted my entire identity tied to a company built from pain as much as from vision. People didn't understand. Some said I was wasting an opportunity. Others said I was too emotional, too soft. It almost made me smile, hearing the same old words in new voices. But this time, they didn't land the same way. Because I finally understood something my grandmother must have known all along. Power isn't about holding on tighter. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to let go. I kept my division, the one focused on preservation and community development. That was mine. That felt real. That felt like purpose instead of performance. Marcus eventually found his own path too. Not overnight, not easily. He struggled more than he ever let people see. But slowly, he stopped trying to be the version of success our father demanded. And in those rare honest conversations between us, I could see glimpses of the brother I might have had if we had grown up in a different kind of home. As for my father, our relationship remains complicated. We still meet, we still talk. Sometimes it's civil, sometimes it's tense. Sometimes it feels like we're two strangers trying to translate a language we were never taught. But I no longer wait for him to become the father I needed. That chapter is closed. And strangely, that acceptance brought me more peace than any apology ever could. Because healing doesn't always come from fixing the past. Sometimes it comes from releasing the expectation that the past will ever change. There's one more thing I need to tell you. The black envelope? The one that started everything? I kept it. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it represents. A moment. A turning point. A quiet interruption in a life that was slowly disappearing into someone else's version of truth. We all have moments like that. Maybe not as dramatic. Maybe not wrapped in mystery. But moments where something inside us whispers, "This is not who you are meant to be." Most people ignore that voice. I almost did. But something, maybe pain, maybe timing, maybe the part of me that refused to disappear completely, made me listen. And that made all the difference. So if you're listening right now, and there's a part of you that feels unseen, unheard, or underestimated, don't wait for a letter. Don't wait for proof. Don't wait for permission. You already know more than you think you do. Trust that. Life doesn't always give us justice the way stories do. Sometimes there's no inheritance, no revelation, no moment where everything is made right. But there is always a choice to become bitter or to become better, to stay silent or to speak, to hold on to pain or to grow beyond it. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by the love, respect, and truth we choose to give each other. And if we didn't receive those things, then maybe our purpose is to become the beginning of something better. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart. If this story touched you in any way, share your thoughts, your truth, your journey. And remember, you are not what they failed to see in you. You are what you choose to become. Tip. Liên mạch. Dưới đây là phần tiếp theo liền mạch, giữ đúng nhịp cảm xúc sâu, không ngắt vụn, đúng phong cách người phụ nữ từng trải đang kể lại câu chuyện của chính mình. There is something people don't tell you about walking away from a life that defined you for so long. It doesn't end in one clean moment. It doesn't feel like a door closing and a new one opening with light pouring in. It feels messy. It feels quiet. It feels like waking up one morning and realizing no one is telling you who you are anymore, and suddenly, that freedom feels heavier than the chains ever did. For weeks after everything settled, I would wake up early out of habit, reach for my phone, expecting messages from my father, instructions, corrections, expectations, but there was nothing. Just silence. And in that silence, I had to decide what kind of voice I would listen to instead. At first, I didn't trust my own. When you've spent years being told you're wrong, slow, emotional, or not enough, your own thoughts start to sound like echoes of other people's judgments. Even when they're gone, their voices stay. They sit quietly in the corners of your mind, waiting for moments of uncertainty to speak again. There were days I almost called my father just to hear someone tell me what to do. Not because I wanted control, but because I was afraid of making the wrong choice without it. And maybe you understand that kind of fear. The fear of finally being free, but not knowing what to do with it. If you've ever felt that, I want you to know something very real. Freedom is not comfortable at first. It's unfamiliar. It asks you to trust yourself before you have proof that you can. And that is one of the hardest things you will ever learn. But it is also where your life truly begins. One evening, about 3 months after the board decision, I found myself back at the old archive building, not because I had to be there, but because some part of me wasn't ready to let it go. The room looked the same. dust floating in the air, rows of boxes filled with years of quiet history. My old desk still in the corner, like it had been waiting for me. I sat down in that chair and just stayed there. No phone, no emails, no expectations, just me. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question no one had ever asked me before. What do you want? Not what my father wanted, not what Marcus needed, not what the family expected. Just me. The answer didn't come right away. It came slowly, in pieces. I realized I didn't want power for the sake of proving them wrong. I didn't want success that felt like revenge. I didn't want to become a colder version of the people who hurt me. I wanted peace. I wanted to build things that mattered. I wanted to wake up without feeling like I had to earn the right to exist in my own life. That realization changed everything. Because once you know what you truly want, you stop chasing things that were never meant for you. Around that time, I started speaking more publicly about my work, not about the family drama, not about the inheritance, but about preservation, about community, about seeing value in things others overlook. And something unexpected happened. People started listening, not because of my last name, not because of the scandal, but because of my voice. And that was something no one in my family had ever given me before. It was something I built. One conversation at a time. One honest moment at a time. One step outside my comfort zone at a time. There was a moment during a small conference when a woman came up to me afterward, tears in her eyes, and said, "I've spent my whole life feeling invisible too. Hearing you speak made me feel like I exist." I held her hands, and in that moment, I realized something that hit deeper than any boardroom victory ever could. My story was never just mine. It belonged to anyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel like they were less. And maybe that's why I had to go through it. Not to win, but to understand. A year later, things are quieter now. Not perfect, not magical, just real. Marcus and I still meet sometimes. There's less tension now, more honesty. Not a perfect sibling bond, but something genuine. Something we are building slowly, without pretending the past didn't happen. My father, he still struggles. Sometimes he tries. Sometimes he falls back into old patterns. But I no longer measure my worth by his ability to change. That was never my responsibility. And letting go of that responsibility gave me back pieces of myself I didn't even realize I had lost. As for me, I finally feel something I never thought I would feel in my own life. I feel steady, not because everything is fixed, but because I am no longer waiting for it to be. If there is one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that your life is not defined by the people who failed to see you. It is defined by the moment you decide to see yourself clearly for the first time. You don't need a perfect family to build a meaningful life. You only need the courage to stop abandoning yourself. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance you will ever receive is not money or power, but the strength to become who you were always meant to be.